Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Now, look, every business is shut down. This one in the corner, behind you, that one.
Forced to close up shop, how Metro Vancouver businesses are struggling to keep up with sky-high property taxes.
It's undignified to have put someone on the floor.
Why a lack of accessible washrooms is keeping one 10-year-old BC girl cooped up inside.
All my pictures, my life, everything's gone.
And fire rips through part of a West End apartment building, forcing everyone into the street.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Closing up shop, moving locations, and working longer hours. Businesses in Metro Vancouver say they're being forced to make agonizing choices because of a quick increase in property taxes. As Tina Lovegreen reports, today's payment deadline in Vancouver is just a reminder of how tough it's getting.
Wissam Khadam works 7 days a week at his barber shop on Denman Street.
Some months we make just even, nothing in profit, you know.
He keeps prices low to bring in more customers. But still, he says high property taxes make it difficult to turn a profit.
Every year going up. This is the problem here.
Dozens of businesses in the area have been forced to shut down because of the high taxes. Most notably, the Chocolate Mousse on Robson closed after 3 decades. And today's deadline to pay off your property taxes is another reminder of the challenges faced by small businesses.
We are very scary. Maybe one day it's going to happen with us, you know. We can't afford to pay rent. We can't afford to pay for the employees.
A few blocks over, this pastry chef is also feeling the squeeze.
Every single dollar kind of counts.
She says because of the high taxes, no money is left to grow the business and fend off competition.
You do need marketing and you need advertising, and for that sort of budget for a small business, it can be non-existent if we need to, budget for property taxes.
To the point that she wonders if her bakery will have a future.
And it's hard because, you have poured your heart and soul into a small business, and that takes up a decade of your life. Then what?
Vancouver City Council has tried to ease the pressure. In April, it decided to shift some of the tax burden from businesses to homeowners. But some say more needs to be done.
We need to reform the archaic assessment system. Right now, business owners are paying sky-high taxes on the air above their business, and something needs to change.
Municipalities are working with the province to rethink how assessments are done and find ways to give small businesses and nonprofits a tax break. But while that is in the works, businesses still have to try to find a way to survive.
Thank you so much.
Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meanwhile, a 19-year low for home sales across the region in June. And for the first time in 2 years, the benchmark price for all homes is just under $1 million. As Leanne Young reports, experts say we haven't reached the bottom yet.
With its expansive views of downtown Vancouver and high-end custom-built finishes, 2 years ago, this East Vancouver home would have sold in a week, and it almost did.
This seller had an offer, and I brought it to her. She had 2 offers, and they were both $2.1 million.
Offers that were both above asking price, but she turned it down.
Now, of course, she's more motivated, so she kind of regrets she didn't take that offer before.
18 months later, it's listed for less than the asking price. It's the new reality in a market that's continuing to slide.
We saw this little glimmer of hope in May, and I think everyone kind of pinned their hopes on that, and for good reason. Sellers want to get moving. But now I'm just seeing the same old trend, and heading into summer, I don't know what we're going to see.
Numbers from the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver show sales were down 34% from the 10-year average in June, the lowest it's been since 2000.
So there's a lot of factors at play, but right now I think what we're seeing the most is buyers on this side and sellers on this side. They're having a really tough time aligning expectations.
Sellers still want the prices of yesteryear, and buyers aren't willing to pay. Plus, most people now want to sell first before they buy a new place. When you add up all the condos, townhomes, and houses across Greater Vancouver, for the first time since 2017, the benchmark price has dropped below $1 million. almost a 10% drop from this time last year. But if you look at the figures over the last decade, we're still looking at a 92% increase. The segment taking the biggest hit are luxury homes. Sales are still being made at the lower end of the market.
We're not even into buyer's market territory by standard definitions for a lot of the market. So it's weaker than it has been, but there's still transactions. This is not a catastrophe yet.
But even so, this real estate professor says don't expect the market to pick up anytime soon.
2018 was a weak year, and June 2019 was much weaker than June 2018. So it looks like the beatings will continue until morale improves.
Where it will land, no one knows. But if you're looking to buy or sell, patience is required. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
The RCMP says no one was hurt after a Langley officer fired a weapon at a Surrey home early this morning. Langley RCMP responded to reports of an injured woman at near 68th Avenue and 200th Street. That investigation led them to a Surrey home on 72nd Avenue. Officers were then confronted by a man described as distraught who allegedly pulled out a weapon. One of the Langley officers then shot a gun without injuring anyone. The man was taken to hospital after being apprehended under the BC Mental Health Act.
I woke up immediately engulfed in flames. So I just took my dog, Cedric, and me, and we ran out, and the rest of the place just ignited. I have fire burns. I lost it all. Everything's gone.
An early morning apartment fire in Vancouver's West End sent people running into the streets. One woman suffered minor burns. Everyone else escaped with no injuries. It started at the top of the 4-story complex at Bidwell and Nelson Streets. The cause of the fire is now under investigation. And a Vancouver police officer has been charged in connection with a car crash that injured 2 pedestrians. Jose Domingo was responding to an emergency last June when his cruiser collided with another police vehicle. The incident sent 2 bystanders and 3 officers to hospital. Domingo is charged under the Motor Vehicle Act with driving without reasonable consideration. He is due in court next month. Well, the push to find out why BC's gas prices hit record highs has run into a roadblock. Several gas companies are refusing to share financial information with the BC Utilities Commission. CBC Vancouver News at 11 host Dan Burrett joins us live now. And Dan, where does this leave the BCUC's inquest?
Anita, they're still working on it, at least for now. The BCUC says, or asked more than a dozen companies to disclose their retail margins, which show how much money they make per liter of gas pumped from their stations. Shell Canada, Husky Energy, Imperial Oil, and Suncor declined, saying those numbers are private. Husky says in a statement, we responded to the BCUC questionnaire. However, some of the questions involve commercially sensitive information, which we must keep confidential. Only 7-Eleven and SuperSave Group shared the data, but they asked it be kept confidential as well, Anita.
Worst case, does it have any power to demand that data?
Well, the Commission doesn't have direct subpoena powers, but it does have its ways, let's just say. The chair and CEO, David Morton, says he doesn't think it will come to that, though. He says they've handled sensitive things like this before.
We've never had parties refuse to hand over confidential information, provided we protect the confidentiality. So I'm confident that these interveners will also do the same once they understand how the process works.
Now, if for some reason the BCUC and the companies can't come to some sort of deal where they hand over that information, the Commission can ask them to testify on the record. And if they refused, it can then go to a judge and ask for that information to be subpoenaed. So for now, we wait. Anita?
Okay, Dan Burrett live for us tonight. Thank you. A 10-year-old Port Coquitlam girl rarely gets to leave her home to do things most kids her age do. The problem? A lack of accessible washrooms. As Jesse Johnston reports, fortunately, the girl's 12-year-old sister has been her tireless advocate and has a plan.
Oh no, George!
Amy Diaz's favorite storyteller in the world is her big sister.
It's cake.
Lucy.
I said I'd be good, George thinks, but
the girls don't get out much. For Amy, who has cerebral palsy, most public places are off limits. Because even if the washrooms are labeled as accessible, they're not accessible enough. Amy is too big for child-sized changing tables, so when she needs her diaper changed, she has to be lifted from her chair and placed on the washroom floor, which breaks her sister's heart.
It's so dirty, and it's just like, it's undignified to have put someone on the floor.
Lucy spent hours searching for a solution, and she found one. Something called Changing Places Washrooms.
It's amazing.
The specialized bathrooms have adult-sized change tables that raise and lower electronically, and power hoists to lift people out of their chairs. The United Kingdom has more than 1,300 Changing Places washrooms. Australia has more than 90, and dozens can be found in the United States. But Canada only has a handful.
And I also feel a little mad because people aren't talking about it.
Lucy met recently with her MLA Mike Farnworth, who calls her an excellent advocate well beyond her years. She's also invited to the BC Heritage Fair in Victoria this weekend, where she's competing against some of the top students in the province who'll be making presentations about important events in Canadian history. Lucy's preferred topic is bathroom accessibility, so she'll be talking about that instead. And she's not the only one in Victoria who's fighting for change. Victoria International Airport is undergoing a $19 million expansion.
First is going to be public awareness and education.
David Willows, whose young son has cerebral palsy, cold called the airport to bring up accessibility. He thought it would take some convincing to get a $15,000 bathroom included in the renovations. Instead, the airport authority said yes on the spot.
I was amazed when I reached out at first and they said, hey, that's a great idea. We'll include it in our expansion.
Nearly 600,000 British Columbians have permanent disabilities, many of whom would benefit from more accessible toilets. Lucy knows it's a long, tough fight ahead until the necessary changes are made, so she'll keep raising awareness until Amy never again has to worry about lying on the floor of a dirty public restroom.
The end.
Jesse Johnston, CBC News, Port Coquitlam.
The province is now taking bids for a contractor to look into what a review found to be toxic work culture at the BC legislature. A report 6 months ago by House Speaker Darryl Plecas made waves over allegations of overspending by 2 top officials. But it also included reports from a number of former employees about the negative culture, including the alleged firing of several staffers without cause. Comprehensive review will focus on the dynamic between the 330 current employees in the Legislative Assembly. Vancouver police are looking for a high-risk sex offender who has failed to return to his halfway house. 29-year-old Jonathan Cardinal is serving a long-term supervisory order after 2 violent sexual assaults in 2010. Cardinal is Indigenous, 5 foot 8 inches and 165 pounds. He has short brown hair and brown eyes. He also has a tattoo on his upper back. A Canada-wide warrant is out for his arrest. Meanwhile, Surrey RCMP are asking for help in identifying 2 suspects involved in a robbery back on May 11th. Police say the 2 men went into a convenience store near 120th Street and 82nd Avenue. One of the men allegedly produced a handgun and stole several items of value from the store before taking off in a black 4-door sedan. The first suspect is described as Caucasian, in his 40s with a heavy build. He was wearing a traffic vest and a gray Under Armour baseball cap with sunglasses. The second suspect is dark-skinned, around 25 years old, with a slim build. He was wearing a dark bucket hat and a white and blue striped shirt. A planned LNG project near Squamish has moved one step closer to breaking ground. Woodfibre LNG now has a permit to build its facility, one of the last key steps before construction can start. It's already gone through 3 environmental assessments and has the approval of the Squamish Nation. The plant would process natural gas from northern BC for export to Asia. Woodfibre says it hopes to start construction by the end of the year. Well, you'll have to wait a little bit longer if you want to enjoy beer or a glass of wine at the beach in Vancouver. A pilot project has been delayed. The Park Board voted last year to sell beer and wine at concession stands at English Bay and Kitts Beach. The problem is liquor licenses aren't Park Board jurisdiction. That lies with the provincial government, which hasn't given the necessary approvals. No date yet on when or if the licenses will come through. Another cloudy day out there today, Brett, but I know you're going to say we need it. We need the rain.
Am I that formulaic, Anita? Oh, come on. No, I'll be honest. I don't think we need the cloud. It's just that rain comes from clouds, so I guess they go hand in hand. But in all fairness, I'm outside right now, our studios, and I'm actually shocked because there, I think, is the tiniest bit of blue sky. If you are in downtown, go outside right now. This is the most cloud-free time that you're going to be getting. I'm honestly quite shocked. But that said, our story is the temperatures. Despite all of this cloud cover, I wanted to show you are still looking at temperatures that are right around seasonal. So if we're looking at downtown Vancouver at about 20, this is bang on. We are in July, but of course that cloud cover can maybe put a bit of a damper onto a few people's spirits. We are just looking at that on the radar here. There isn't really anything radar-wise. No rain to be expected, but cloud is going to be still the #1 story. And for the next 24 hours or so, it's going to probably slowly ramp up. It's going to go from drizzle to then maybe some light rain and then maybe into some full-on rain by the time we get into the end of the week. And I'll tell you a little bit more on that coming up. But by the time that we get to tomorrow at least, daytime high temperatures once again are going to be at a fairly comfortable 20 degrees. So I don't think it's going to be too bad. And I'll be honest, no, I don't really like the cloud that much. And fingers are crossed that we might get a few breaks of sun in there, but I'm not going to hold my breath for it. Anita?
I was starting to think you're a rain and cloud kind of guy, Brett.
No, not all the time. Just a nice mixture of everything.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, hundreds of young soccer players were treated to a morning on the pitch today with the Whitecaps and the Vancouver Police Department. This is the 30th annual VPD soccer camp. It's free for kids who may not be able to afford formal training, all to give them a chance to make friends, sharpen their skills, and create positive moments between officers and the community.
It's fun playing with my friends and having fun here.
We get to play games and we get to take shots and we play octopus and shark attack.
Fun, super fun.
Oh, why?
The camp runs until Friday, capped off by a mini World Cup tournament. And you can always find more details on all of our stories online. Just go to cbc.ca/BC. This newscast is also available live and on demand. If you want to do that, you can always download the CBC Gem app, or you can follow CBC Vancouver on Facebook and YouTube. Millennials are set to be the largest block of eligible voters in the upcoming fall federal election. After the break, we hear their views. A pivotal moment in history when Apollo 11 landed on the moon. This summer will mark 50 years since that day. And ahead of its anniversary, NASA has restored the mission's control room in Houston. Our Eli Glasner has more.
This is the Johnson Space Center. It is a working space center with mission controls right now that are communicating with the International Space Station. But for years, the original Mission Control Center, responsible for those historic Apollo flights, sat neglected until now.
Okay, all flight controllers, gonna go for landing. Retro, go, right up, go, go, control, go, telcom, go.
This is the result, the newly restored Mission Control Center, where visitors can stand or sit in the viewing lounge and watch a series of highlights recreating some of the most dramatic moments of the 1969 moon mission.
I just can't tell you how proud we all are of what you have done.
And it's all about the details, so remember, it was 1969. This isn't for your phone. This is, of course, an ashtray. These were 3D printed just so you can have the same experience sitting in the chair, of course, without the smoke hanging in the air.
3, 2, 1, liftoff.
Relaunch of Mission Control. Many of the original Apollo controllers returned, including Gene Kranz, the flight director who was working when the Eagle landed and Neil Armstrong took those first steps. He talked to CBC News about the emotion at seeing Mission Control come back to life.
This is a place where history was made, the books were written, the challenges were issued, they were controlled. We moved forward, accepted risk as the price of progress. And at times we went too far too fast. We lost a crew, but we picked the ball up and continued to run forward even stronger.
But as much as NASA is focused on preserving its history, it's also very much looking forward into the future, talking about plans already underway for a new mission to the moon, a giant leap featuring the first step by a woman on the lunar surface in 2024. Eli Glasser, CBC News, Houston.
Very interesting. Well, stay with us. We will have more on a big shakeup at one of the world's largest pot companies, which just so happens to be Canadian. That is coming up in just a few minutes. The fall federal election is quickly approaching, and this time around, Millennials will be the largest block of eligible voters. Now, it's a powerful position, especially considering it's the first time many of them have ever been able to go to the ballot box. The CBC's Carolyn Dunn caught up with some first-time voters to get their thoughts on the upcoming election.
The mission of Apathy is Boring is to get young people to the polls. Even if they know the idea of a high voter turnout for first-time voters is practically a fairy tale.
To just say that they don't feel like their vote doesn't matter.
So what's your answer to that when someone says, my voice doesn't matter?
Imagine if you all actually went out and voted, how different that could look.
But according to the poll, more than half of first-time voters, 56%, say they don't know enough to cast a ballot, even though a majority of them, 57%, think the country is on the right track compared to 43% of all Canadian voters.
Just never seen the need to.
21-year-old rapper Darnell Kofi didn't know the federal parties or candidates until we challenged him to Google it.
It's there, right on your phone.
Okay.
Think you give some consideration to it?
Yeah. After this, yeah. I'm gonna check it out for sure.
That's not to say first-time voters don't know what issues are important to them. Climate change, cost of living, and school expenses top their concerns.
I care about the environment and I want to have a voice in my political system.
A lot of the issues for me are environmental issues, especially living in Alberta with oil and gas. LGBTQ issues are big for me too, as well as the immigration issues that follow.
Did you know the election coming up?
Nationally, 8 in 10 first-time voters prioritize dealing with climate change, and more of them are willing to pay to fix it compared to the general population. But many still feel detached from what political parties are saying.
The age groups are completely different, and like the parties and probably their views are different than the people, the next generation coming up.
But don't mistake disenchantment with the political system for cynicism, because the poll found first-time voters are more idealistic than the average Canadian voter, and when they do go to the polls, they tend to vote with their hearts. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, Calgary.
There's been a major shakeup at the world's biggest pot company, which happens to be Canadian. As Jacqueline Hansen reports, the co-founder and co-CEO of Canopy Growth says he has been pushed out of the job by the board of directors.
From the seed of an idea to a nearly $20 billion company.
Job done.
Bruce Linton helped Canopy Growth reach heights no other cannabis companies have in Canada. But now he's out.
No, I love the company. I don't love this decision.
Linton says he was fired as co-CEO and pushed off the company's board.
I'm probably not the most easy guy to get along with, because you don't create a $20 billion company by saying, hey, people, what would you like me to do today?
Linton was the face of Canopy, but some analysts say that was it.
We felt it was far more promotional than operational, and when the operational time came, we didn't feel there was much there.
Linton helped land a $5 billion investment from Constellation Brands a year ago, the company that owns Corona Beer and Kim Crawford Wines. But Canopy has been burning through cash. And just last quarter, it revealed a larger than expected loss.
The surprise shakeup.
When the news of Linton's firing broke today, Canopy and some other pot stocks fell, but by midday gained back those losses.
I think it says more about Bruce Linton and Canopy Growth than it does say about the industry. And I think we need to separate that. And I think it's a great opportunity for the industry because we do believe there are genuine companies that can grow great cannabis, that have a shot at doing it at scale.
At Canopy, its other co-CEO, Mark Zakulin, will take over for now, but the search is on for a new leader to keep the company at the forefront of an industry it helped create. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
Why women are at far greater risk of being hurt seriously in a car crash. That's coming up. Thanks for joining us tonight. Here are some of our top stories.
It's undignified to have put someone on the floor.
A lack of accessible washrooms is keeping a 10-year-old BC girl with cerebral palsy inside. When Amy Diaz needs her diaper changed, she is lifted from her wheelchair and placed on the unclean floor. Her family is hoping the province will bring in more washrooms that have changing tables for adults.
Every year going up.
Closing up shop, moving locations, and working longer hours. Sky-high property taxes are forcing Metro Vancouver businesses to make agonizing choices. And with today being the deadline in Vancouver to pay your taxes, it's acting as a tough reminder.
The fire was already in the apartment. I literally had 2 seconds to act or I would have been dead.
Some residents lose everything after fire tears through part of a West End apartment building. One woman suffering minor burns. Well, it turns out, despite modern cars being safer than ever, women are at a far greater risk of being seriously hurt in a car crash. As Aaron Saltzman explains, the big reason for that is safety tests use crash test dummies modeled after men.
Test will commence in 4 seconds.
In automotive research, the best way to learn how to make vehicles safer is to destroy them. And study the damage done to the dummies inside. But it turns out the dummies really only represent one specific type of driver.
Traditionally, we've had crash test dummies that are a mid-size male.
The male dummies are a holdover from the early days of crash tests, designed in the 1970s and have been in use since the 90s.
This is the dummy that began development in the year 2000 and still isn't finished.
New dummies can take decades to develop, in part because they're far more sophisticated than they appear, closely mimicking parts of the human anatomy with dozens of data points.
This guy has between 120 and 150 different data channels.
But he's still a guy. And all these years of male-based data collection appears to have had an enormous impact on the safety outcomes of females in vehicles when compared to men. A new study about to be released by researchers at the University of Virginia has found the odds of a female sustaining a serious to fatal injury in a collision are now 73% higher than they are for a male. There are a few female dummies, but they're just scaled down males, which don't really represent women at all.
Differences in fat distribution, differences in muscle strength. You have differences in bony alignment. The pelvis is different. I mean, there's just a huge number of things that suggest that females are not smaller males.
Carolyn Roberts is one of several researchers at the University of Virginia trying to pinpoint why women are more vulnerable in car crashes.
You have a 3-point seat belt. So how does that sit on top of the breasts? Does it move more easily if I lean out and now I have a more complicated chest geometry than a male? Is that problematic?
We don't know. She says there's never been a study on how breast tissue affects seatbelt placement. There may also be other reasons why women are more at risk.
Throughout the menstrual cycle, stiffnesses and joint ranges of motion change. So there could be a time during the menstrual cycle at which a female is more susceptible to injury.
At least one automaker is paying attention. Volvo studied 40 years of actual crashes and also found women to be more at risk. It's now sharing that data with other manufacturers.
The intent was to make sure we design cars that are safe for everyone. And of course, there's differences in males versus females, and that comes through, and that needs to be taken into consideration when you build the car.
That means paying more attention to gender differences when it comes to research and design, which should ultimately improve the safety of everyone. Aaron Saltzman, CBC News, Ruckersville, Virginia.
A live shot tonight of the Port of Vancouver. Another gloomy day for the most part. Clouds expected to continue. Brett is here with the full forecast next. Well, things may be a bit cooler here in BC, but in Montreal, temperatures are soaring.
Absolutely. With the humidity, when you factor it in, daytime high temperatures in the low 30s will be feeling more like the low 40s over the next couple of days. As Jayla Bernstein reports, emergency and city officials are reminding people to make sure that they have a place to cool off.
There's no question it's a scorcher. Even in a shaded park, the heat is intense.
It's too hot.
People are being reminded to drink plenty of water and to avoid too much physical exertion. And another idea:
eat ice cream.
Normally, she'd be hanging out at this St. Henry pool, but its opening was delayed until the end of summer. So they're headed for air conditioning.
Now we are going to the library for attending activities, so we are trying to fix something indoor.
Though the city is not in emergency mode yet, officials say they're prepared.
We're watching and we're ready to move forward if necessary, but we still need to be all vigilant for ourselves, our families, and for our neighbors as well.
The heat wave that hit the city last summer left 66 people dead. The province says it's always improving the tools it has to target people at risk.
We have a whole system where we know where they are. We get into contact with those people at home and we make sure that they are all right. We even bring them to air-conditioned spaces.
Montreal is also working on bigger picture fixes to help cool the city, like reducing heat islands by adding more green space and taking care of the city's most vulnerable.
At all times, the people who are most at risk are the ones that are least able to protect themselves. And so whether it's 25 degrees or 35 degrees, the idea of breaking social isolation is always pertinent.
For now, officials are reminding people to be prudent and to check in on neighbors who might need help. Jayla Bernstein, CBC News, Montreal.
Yeah, that hits really close to home. Montreal was my home for 8 years, and in the summertime, if you live in an old building, they don't have air conditioning. It's a lot like Vancouver in places. We just don't really have that here. But that humidity is an absolute killer. You feel it every single day, and there's just no relief from it, seemingly.
And that's where you pull out all the fans.
Exactly. I've even put a cloth in the fridge to try to cool down, put it over your face after. Nothing seems to help it, though. But we definitely don't have that problem here in Vancouver, I can assure you. Let's take a look back at the morning that was. Had quite some interesting clouds going by this morning. You can see them there. This is now facing south, actually. This is just south on the Canopy Bridge, I believe, and we see clouds all of a sudden kind of going out of nowhere. We see them in two directions at once, and honestly, this was kind of the story of the day. We really just had a lot of cloud cover blanketing at us, but as you saw me outside, we had a little bit of sunshine. But maybe you're asking, where's that summer? Well, if you were paying attention to that last segment there, it is all in the east. I wanted to show you current temperatures across the country right now. In Ottawa, Montreal, and Toronto, 26, 27 degrees. This is 9 o'clock at night there. The sun has already gone down or is just about to, and it is still going to be making those nights quite sweltering hot and a lot cooler over in the west. And this is pretty normal when this type of a pattern sets up. Did want to draw some attention to the fact that we are looking at some rain going across BC throughout the day on Thursday. This is fairly widespread. This is going to be making its way through the Caribou, the Thompson, into the Okanagan, but you're going to notice that Vancouver throughout this whole point, we're going to be the last to get this rain. It's all traveling from the north to the south. So on Thursday, just expect some cloud cover and maybe some drizzle throughout the whole day. When it comes to Thursday night into Friday, however, well, that now gets to be our turn to enjoy or get some of this rain widespread across the lower mainland. This is going to be showers largely throughout the day, and there's pretty good confidence that this will be lasting throughout essentially Friday evening. Unfortunately, as we go a little bit farther into the weekend, it's going to be looking a little unsettled, but I'll give you that forecast tomorrow. In terms of our current fire danger rating, it is still looking fairly low to moderate in the interior, which is great, and we are looking at improving conditions along the south coast. What do we have in store for the next 5 days? Well, kind of like yesterday, temperatures are going to be right around that 20 to 21 degree mark throughout the next few days, but as I mentioned, you're going to be seeing those showers more so onto Friday and then into Saturday as well. It's not going to be toward the end of the weekend when essentially Sunday and Monday roll around that we should likely be starting to see more of that sunshine, which I know we all will be rejoicing when it comes back.
I don't think anyone, well, actually, no, maybe some people will be complaining about it.
There are always some, but I think the vast majority of people should probably be smiling about it.
And that's not too hot. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's comfortable. Exactly.
Okay. And we now know which two countries are going to be playing for the championship title in the Women's World Cup after today's tense matchup between Sweden and the Netherlands.
A scoreless first half led to the best chance yet for Sweden. Unfortunately, that was turned away by a fingertip save by the Dutch keeper.
And in extra time, the Netherlands' Jackie Gronin got a strong shot off and snuck it just inside the post, sending her team to the final against a dominant American squad. And sticking with sports, because it seems like it's been a month full of...
It has been a month of
some
sports.
Exciting sports. Basketball fans across the country are near the breaking point. I don't know if you've caught any of this today, but days into NBA free agency and nothing but frustrating silence from Kawhi Leonard on whether he'll stay with the Toronto Raptors.
And as our Greg Ross reports today, the finals MVP was rumored to be in Toronto for what was likely the last meeting ahead of his decision.
It's a frenzy that started when one Raptors fan spotted Raptors president Masai Ujiri and general manager Bobby Webster inside the Hazelton Hotel. He sent out pictures and videos of his encounter. Not long after that, I was able to confirm for myself that they were indeed here having lunch. I watched as Ujiri and Webster went up an elevator here at the hotel. But what really kicked this frenzy into high gear were rumors that Leonard himself was also coming here to meet them. Leonard was rumored to be on a plane coming from LA, a private jet owned by the company that runs the Raptors. It touched down in Toronto this afternoon. Many speculating those climbing down the stairs included the King of the North himself and his uncle Dennis. Even though there was no official word, as soon as the passengers climbed into those dark SUVs, the hunt was on. A local news station even redirected its traffic chopper to the cause, tracking the vehicles live as they headed downtown.
And they're getting now back on the Garden.
That helped touch off a firestorm of speculation that Kawhi Leonard was indeed back in town. And if so, why? To negotiate? To sign? A hopeful crowd gathered outside that luxury hotel where Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster were waiting. For fans, it felt like the confirmation they needed.
I'm just here to say thank you. Thank you to Kawhi. Honestly, he inspired the country. He inspired the city. The last couple months have been like so exciting.
Social media started lighting up with such a frenzy of fan excitement bordering on obsession. Others started calling for Toronto to just chill out a little bit. Finally, the SUVs arrived at the hotel, went into the underground parking lot, and that's where the trail went cold. We don't know exactly what transpired inside the walls of this hotel here today, but for many NBA insiders, this frenzy has put the Raptors back on top when it comes to the Kawhi Leonard free agent sweepstakes. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
14 dead Russian sailors, a top-secret submarine, and a government unwilling to share the details. Coming up, we take a look at what happened.
I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Your favorite summer tradition is back starting July 5th. Musical Nooners is back for its 10th year. Join us for free concerts weekdays at noon all summer long. And get your tickets today to the Vancouver Folk Music Festival, July 19th to 21st at Jericho Beach Park. Enjoy a weekend of the finest folk and roots music from around the world. For more, check us out online.
14 Russian soldiers who died on board a top-secret submarine will be given state honors. They were killed Monday after a mysterious accident in Russia's Arctic. As Chris Brown reports, Russia is refusing to release details.
Not for the first time, Murmansk residents left flowers at a memorial to mark an accident involving dead submariners. Those killed in the top-secret Russian sub died of smoke inhalation, according to Russia's government. Among them, some of the most decorated officers in the nation's military, including 2 heroes of Russia. They sacrificed their lives to eliminate the source of the fire, save their comrades and the submersible, said Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. This is one of the few known photos of what Russian media are reporting to be the AS-12, a so-called spy sub. Nicknamed a Losharik after a cartoon horse, this Russian TV graphic shows it's usually carried by a larger vessel to its destination. Its compartmentalized hull enables it to dive deep to the ocean floor, apparently to do things such as eavesdrop on undersea communication cables. Whatever caused the fire and precisely what the mission was, Russia's leadership isn't saying. The official line is that it was a research vessel on a research mission. But this independent military analyst believes since it was in very shallow water, most likely the vessel had just been refurbished.
Defense Minister Shoigu already said that there was at least 1 civilian specialist on board, which would indicate that this was a test run just outside of the shipyard.
In a tragic coincidence, the Losharik accident happened just days after a movie about Russia's worst sub-disaster opened here. The loss of the Kursk 19 years ago left 119 sailors dead, and the fumbled response from authorities, including a young Vladimir Putin, has haunted Russia's military ever since. Russia's military has touted big plans to modernize with new missiles, ships, and aircraft, but it's also suffered through major disasters, losing scores of servicemen to plane crashes in Syria, and now to a fire in a submarine in the Arctic. Chris Brown, CBC News, Moscow.
Canada is strongly condemning the airstrike in Libya that killed at least 44 people and left more than 130 wounded. The attack tore through a detention center holding migrants trying to cross the Mediterranean to Europe. As the CBC's Derek Stoffel explains, it sits next to a military camp that's been targeted before.
They had come to Libya on a journey seeking a better life. Instead, these migrants from other parts of Africa were caught up in an airstrike that destroyed a detention center just outside of Tripoli.
Some people wounded and they died on the road on their way running, and some people are still under the block.
Hundreds had been living in the cramped building seen here before the attack. Now, some migrants who came to Libya with so little are scrounging for whatever they can take away. For the last 5 years, Libya has been embroiled in another civil war. This fight between the government backed by the United Nations and forces loyal to the warlord Khalifa Haftar, who leads what he calls the Libyan National Army. For the last 3 months, Haftar's forces have tried to take control of the capital, Tripoli. Both sides blame the other for the airstrike, and it's unclear if the detention center was the intended target. Libya is a main departure point for migrants and refugees heading to Europe. About 5,000 people are housed in detention centers after being turned back from boats in the Mediterranean Sea. Now, the UN's refugee agency says those migrants should be moved away from the front lines of the civil war.
We have to see a change now. There has to be an immediate release of all the detainees from these centres, and we have to make sure that no rescued refugee rescued on the central Mediterranean is taken back to Libya.
The UN says the attack could be a war crime, and it's now calling for a full investigation into the airstrike. Derek Stoffel, CBC News, London.
Well, Washington, D.C. is getting ready for a 4th of July celebration tomorrow, unlike many before it, with a show of military might. As Ellen Morrow found out, party politics as well, on a day that's usually about a country coming together.
An armored vehicle on the move, a scene reminiscent of a war zone playing out in the heart of Washington, D.C.
We're going to have a great 4th of July in Washington, D.C. It'll be like no other. It'll be special.
It will certainly have a Trumpian twist. Forget just the usual fireworks show. This year's event will also feature an unusual display of military might, tanks and a flyover.
Best fighter jets in the world and other planes too. And we're going to have some tanks stationed outside. Got to be pretty careful with the tanks.
President Trump will also give a speech, the first president since Nixon to make an address as part of the formal celebrations. Nixon's, though, was videotaped. Trump's will be live from the Lincoln Memorial. In the front row, Republican donors in specially reserved seats on what's normally a nonpartisan day.
It is the birthday of the country. Well, he has commandeered it.
Trump dubs the event a salute to America. Critics say it's a salute to himself.
It's just not done in this country, and it will be seen as very out of place on the grassy mall, which is used basically for flying kites.
The cost? No numbers have been released, but it's expected to far surpass last year's budget, reportedly around $2 million.
Anytime you get a presidential visit, there are inherent security costs.
Back on the mall, the preparations continue for a 4th of July unlike any the country has seen.
Best thing to ever happen to this nation. Have a man like Trump in there to get crooked politics out of it and get this country back to where it should be.
I could say something about despots and so-called presidents who need to show their big tanks, but I won't say it because I'm being recorded.
Divided opinions in a divided America. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
Spider-Man is back on the silver screen. How does the web-slinger make out after the last blockbuster Avengers movie? Our review is coming up after the break. Well, Marvel's mega movie Avengers Endgame raked in billions of dollars at the box office earlier this year. And since then, many things have changed in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
You can see the consequences of those changes in the new movie, Spider-Man: Far From Home. And here with a review from our very own film guy is Eli Glasner.
Everywhere I go, I see his face. I just really miss him.
Spider-Man: Far From Home is the first post-Avengers Endgame Marvel movie, and that means Spider-Man is home, but not exactly the same. The beginning of the film is much darker and dour, and is a sign of how much things have changed. When the commander of S.H.I.E.L.D. calls for help, well, just look at how Peter Parker reacts.
Nick Fury's calling you.
I don't really want to talk to Nick
Answer
Fury.
the phone.
Why?
Because if you don't talk to him, then I have to talk to him. I don't want to talk to him. You sent Nick Fury to voicemail?
I gotta go.
You do not ghost Nick Fury.
So what gives? Well, Parker wants to put his spider life on pause because he's got a school trip coming up, and this isn't just to a museum around the corner, but to Europe. I'm talking Paris, London, Venice, with his best bud Ned, with his nemesis Flash, and more importantly, MJ, the girl he's been crushing on. So everything is looking up until the giant water monster appears.
What is that?
I don't know.
Okay, so shooting webs at the towering column of angry water, maybe not the best move. Luckily, there's a new hero on the block. Meet Mysterio, the, well, mysterious hero from a parallel dimension. He's tangled with these so-called elemental monsters before, and is here to give Spidey Pants a pep talk.
There's a part of me that wants me to tell you, just turn around, run away from all this, and then there's another part of me that knows what we're about to fight. What's at stake?
The problem with Far From Home is just how familiar everything is starting to feel. The grumbly Nick Fury, the CGI-driven battle scenes. There's a creeping complacency that assumes our affection, but there's nowhere near the innovation of the previous films. The best parts are still the hapless Peter Parker trapped between caring for his friends and family and the responsibilities of the hero life.
Want to go in on a pair?
You mean let's sit next to each other?
Yeah.
Parker, are you in position?
No.
Okay. No.
Why the hell
You don't.
The special effect there is the acting. Tom Holland's anxious nerves, the way it hurts him to disappoint MJ, and Zendaya herself as this woman who hides behind sarcasm starting to open up. That's what I wanted more of, and less of the superhero shenanigans. Luckily, what saves this Spider film is the two post-credit scenes. The first, which might be more important than the entire film that preceded it. And that bumps this all up to 3.5 stars out of 5. Eli Glasner, CBC News, Toronto.
He looked and sounded so disappointed.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to give it 2.5.
That took a little bit of a turn, but I mean, I'm impressed to see that he thinks so highly of that movie.
I'm very shocked, but
yeah.
all right. You can always find our news program online at cbc.ca/BC. Dan Burritt is here at 11 o'clock with your next local news after the national. Have a good night.
Good night.